No, I'm going to explain to you real quick.
Continue walking.
But don't be rolling out. There's a reason for it.
I remember you being at CNBC really kind of from the beginning, and so I guess you weren't there as long. You were there a long time, but I would have never imagined you leaving CNBC. I don't know why, because when you see someone all the time for such a long period of time, it was kind of like a Walter Cronkite moment where you see that person all the time on the same show. They move them around a little bit. And then you clearly see them kind of becoming the boss or like really, really important at the network, right? Where the network really only talking about you, or at least the shows are around you and stuff like this. And so probably the top question I wanted to ask you was, like, how hard was it to make that decision to go to Fox? Because I never watched anything else but CNBC and you, because I think you were on Squawk Box and you were everywhere. I didn't actually know how you had a personal life because it seemed like you were on every show. But I wanted to ask you if you could talk about the decision to leave and go to Fox. Like, was it an easy decision? Like, did you know for sure that you were going to do that? Like, how did you get to that decision?
No, I didn't know really what to do. It was definitely some things happened that made it easier. So what happened was I loved CNBC, and I really felt that I was able to be on the front lines of so many changes in our economy and really the front lines of the individual investor revolution, right before the 1990s, when people were arming themselves with as much information as possible to make their own investment decisions. Then the dot-com boom and, the dot-com bust, the birth of like Amazon and Google. It was all about growth. And then, of course, being at the New York Stock Exchange on September 11th was incredibly meaningful to me. But then just following the cycles of investing and the globalization boom, where one thing happens in one part of the world and it's, impacted everywhere through, the equity markets. And then the debt crisis and the housing, boom, where you've got, house prices being up 40% year over year, 2006, and really for no good reason. I mean, until there was a bust, and then Bill Clinton, the Clinton regime, and then Barack Obama and the Donald Trump, the Bush era. All of these things were playing out, I think, in the stock market and the broad economy. And I was very focused on reporting and learning about the economy and on business. And my big gets were CEOs, Jack Welch, people like that. But then I recognized that things were changing and we were not in the, dot-com era any longer. And national security and policy were becoming bigger issues. And it wasn't just this small pool of investment people that were, having an impact and being heard. And, so anyway, I was looking to expand my own portfolio. I was at CNBC 20 years, and it was it was an incredible 20 years in America's history, because it was searching for growth, creating growth and opportunity in different parts of the world for American business. I didn't really need to study policy as much as hearing from the CEO and the manager of business about what they were seeing and what they were doing to affect the stock market. And so after a while, I realized that things were changing. It wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. A lot of managers and CEOs would say to me, Maria, we don't care about the whisper number. We're not, doing knee-jerk reactions. We've got a long-term plan. We've got a vision for where the company and the economy is going to be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years and beyond. And then as I was approaching my 20-year anniversary at CNBC, I started to think about that. And I went to my boss at the time and I said, listen, I'm hearing a lot from different people, managers, CEOs, that we're too short-term focused. And it's too much about what's the trade? How am I going to get rich overnight? And I said, we should broaden it out and look long-term, think about, a wise investment and savings plan for the long term, what's important to families. And he basically said to me, I don't agree. No, we have to speak to the trading desk. We want to speak to the trading desk. And that's when I realized that I had hit ceilings, just as I had hit ceilings 20 years earlier when I was at CNN. Because when I was at CNN, it was Ted Turner's CNN. They were doing things that never had been done before, like covering a news event as it was happening, which is, of course, before Fox News. And this was, the Gulf War was happening. I was a production assistant. I learned how to cover the impact of the first Gulf War as it was happening. And I remember as a young, I was a PA, and I remember Bernard Shaw, rest in peace. He was under the bed in Baghdad saying bombs are going off right now. And this is what's happening. And, CNN was really doing great work. And that's how I learned about democratizing information, putting the viewer first, understanding, what the pivots are and trying to communicate and give audiences what they want. And then it served me well when I got to CNBC and became the first person to broadcast from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange and could report on the market as it was happening, as it was trading. But Fox, for me, represented a new opportunity to grow personally, because I wasn't focused on policy. I wasn't focused on Washington, certainly wasn't focused on politics. It was all about, business and, and growth. So I realized that this was an opportunity for me to grow and expand my own portfolio. That's why I did it.
I got it. And that's, that was definitely not the answer I was thinking, but the reason I say this is because during your response, I was thinking about CNBC is still short term. Almost everything you talk about, and obviously, I'm not going to have you comment on your former employer, but I actually think it's like sort of fed this Robinhood instant gratification option thing, like option action. These really become like a short term. It's not even. It's not bad. It's very, very intensely short term. It's funny to reminisce with you.
It's very narrow.
Yeah,
and it's a very narrow group of people because. And, it's funny because now we're celebrating 15 years of Fox Business. And I've been talking to, my colleagues, and we went and rang the opening bell the other day at the NASDAQ. And it made me start to think about Fox Business. And when I think about it, I think, you know what? It's not about the economy. It's about your economy. It's about what's important to your family. It's not about the stock market. It's about your market. Fox Business has a much broader mandate. And that's why we're talking about crime. And that's why we're talking about corruption. And that's why we're talking about inflation. And, and like how much stuff costs, not what's the trade in the market that I'm going to make money overnight. It's just not what's important to the viewers.
I can see that you have not lost any energy since you were a young one on CNBC. You're still there. I wondered, just to talk about CNN a little bit, and John Malone's Liberty Media and what he's doing with Warner and Zaslav. I think I said his name right. I never get that right. I've not heard people talk much about it, but here's one of the most powerful guys in media, really helped Fox get launched with Rupert. One of the most powerful guys, not saying much, but I watched one interview with him where he talked about CNN returning to its glory. Is it a coincidence that people are disappearing there? I mean, it seems like to me, no one's paying attention that John Malone is a big influence on what's happening. And the reason I bring that up is because your numbers are bigger than it looks like to me. And I could be wrong. I've been running a hedge fund and working on Wall Street for 33 years. So we get the numbers wrong all the time, right? But aren't you killing them? Like, is your viewership bigger than all of CNN?
Well, right now, Sunday Morning Futures is the highest rated news program on Sundays, oftentimes, on weekends, all weekend. And, Mark Levin is also, and Fox and Friends are also, right there. And we're, it's obviously resonating with the audience. I'm very proud. As far as CNBC, we've been beating CNBC now for several months. We're really proud of what we're doing in the morning because, again, I'm not just doing short-term trading.
Sure.
And I think that has, and we have a great connection with the audience. I feel like I know what they want me to do and what they want to make sure we cover.
When I grew up, when I was younger, it was Louis Rukeyser. That was kind of the show was Friday nights. It was Owens Mills, Maryland. You didn't have this sort of massive coverage that you do today. Do you consider yourself like a modern? I mean, I will tell you, the vast majority of, and this is a little sad to me a little bit, but the vast majority of people I ever talk to, and I talk to a lot of people, I travel a lot, I do a lot of interviews, I meet a lot of people, ask a lot of questions. They only know you. Is that a weird thing for you to be like modern, like more than modern day, but like bigger, way bigger? I know in Wall Street's, people would freak out if I said this, but in Wall Street's term, like in our little circle, everyone knows Louis Rukeyser, but you're as big as they get. Is that what's that like for you? Because I'm sure you knew what it was like for Louis Rukeyser and how iconic he was.
Well, Todd, I appreciate that. The truth is, I had no idea, that what was happening. But I've been so grateful to have been able to, meet and talk with Joey Ramone and, work with Francis Ford Coppola and, other directors, to just like do cameos of, be myself. I mean, it's been incredible.
Mm-hmm.
What can I say? I'm so grateful to have been able to get noticed a little. And I think, I'm trying hard to do the right thing and respond to audiences and make sure that I'm continuing to search for the truth and bring value. And that's what I've always tried to do. And that's what I think I'm hoping, we're doing again, because the show right now, Mornings with Maria on Fox Business, is killing it. And I've got an incredible team of producers, really so talented, and they're making it happen every day by really covering the things that our audience cares about and pointing out, some of the obvious things that unfortunately a lot of our colleagues do not want to touch. And I just think it's so crazy. I mean, there are so many things that we all should agree on, and policies that spark crime are bad. Influence peddling is bad. Ignoring things that you're doing and doing them, like spending an incredible amount of money and stoking 40-year high inflation. But you don't hear these topics covered.
No, it's an ironic situation that we can't even agree on the facts. I mean, it's really, but that's kind of what I go back to about CNN, though, and that is, so Malone talked about CNN being iconic, the first to do certain things, the Ted Turner CNN, and what I can't get, and I don't want to feed in this too much, but what I can't get up until recently, and I don't know if it's still going on because I can't watch the network. But the doubling down, I watch a little bit occasionally just to see what's going on, but the doubling down of a policy in which you're declining and you don't think you should do anything different. Like I was astonished at the numbers between Fox and all the other networks. Like what I'm trying to ask you is, like, if you were stewarding a ship and you continued to like lose ground over and over and over again, and all of them have been performing so poorly relative to Fox, and the numbers are so gigantic. Why is it that you think that they don't change it at all? Like I can't even get it. If I were tripling, quadrupling down on policies, I'd be thrown out. Like if that were leading to this direction. Why is it you think that they're continuing to not care about those numbers?
Well, I think after the Obama administration, many political operatives and Obama staffers, I think, went to social media like Google and FaceTime, and Google and Facebook and Twitter. And I think you saw that. I also, think that probably, at CNN, you had such a, a political bent. And, there was so much hate. I mean, I remember anchors on CNN, trashing me. I mean, I was like, wow. I mean, they really got personal. And I think it was a smart idea for Malone to say, look, we want to be neutral. I don't know how that's going. But I would say the beauty of Fox and Fox News Media is that there are benches and benches of people who have been in really important jobs in terms of government and, defense, military, former Speaker of the House, and all, a real informed, deep bench of people who have opinions, rather than, the anchors trashing people that they don't agree with. I don't know. It really got, I think, very personal.
I wanted to talk about the Rex because I was curious as to when you worked there, did you always want to be a journalist?
No, I didn't. I worked at the Rex Manor, my father's restaurant, when I was a girl. I was the co-check girl. And I loved it enormously. I'm very proud of my family. My grandfather, Carmine Bartiromo, came to this country around 1906. And the first thing he did is he went and he served in World War I. And then when he came back from the war, he built a restaurant. He was a bricklayer in Italy, construction worker in Italy. So he and his cousin literally built a restaurant, and then they called it the Rex Manor after the famous ship, the Rex, which transported Italians from Italy to America in the 1930s. And it was a very famous ship. My grandfather took that ship, but that wasn't his first voyage to, his first trip here. He was only 13. And, my dad took over the Rex. It was a restaurant, brick oven pizza, catering hall. And we would do weddings and, bar mitzvahs and all sorts of parties. My uncle was the band. It was the Carmine Barty Orchestra.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
When I think about it, I crack up. And then my mom on Wednesday nights would take tickets. They had a night on Wednesday nights called Parents Without Partners. And the Parents Without Partners, there was live music. My uncle's band played. And it was like a social. So it was just so, I loved it. And we sold it. My last big party there was my Sweet 16 that we had there. And then my dad sold it. So it's so great.
When did you decide how do you migrate today? How did you migrate back then into wanting to be a reporter?
Well, I went to NYU, and when I was at NYU, I was studying business and economics only because econ seemed to come easy to me. So I was taking economics and statistics. And then my mother said to me, Maria, you should try a journalism class. I think you would like it. And I said, wow, maybe I will. I used to like to write. I was always writing. And so I took a journalism class, and that led me to television and, television classes at NYU. I absolutely loved it. And then I got an internship at CNN. And because they were just beginning to hire in their business division, they hired me in business news. First, I started at CNN as an intern. Right out of college, I was an intern in the entertainment division, which I would choose the music for the bump outs and bump ins. I would just choose different music and videos. But then they hired me staff in business news in 1989, in September of 1989. So it was my mom's recommendation. And, I've learned so much from that time in terms of, content live and people's reaction to it. It's really been an incredible journey. And I feel like I've been able to make a difference in terms of leveling the playing field, democratizing news and information for people who, certainly in the business early days, who wanted to empower themselves with as much information as possible to make wise investment decisions. And I think at Fox, I've been able to pursue some very important stories. When I first got to Fox, it was in 2014. A year later, the first, Donald Trump came down the elevator. And since then, covering, getting to know, people in Washington has been incredibly valuable to me, and being able to communicate what's really going on. Even, including corruption and so much about policy.
Almost my entire Wall Street career, in fact, I think you have been like sort of the primary reporter that I have seen my entire career, and there are I could speak to you all day about like things that have happened on your watch, like 9/11, which is your birthday. I remember watching that at the same time. It was your birthday. It was like very because I worked on the 60th floor of World Trade. It was really a debacle. Obviously, we could get back into that in a second, but I wondered if you recall what it was like during. I'm going to give you a phrase, and you're going to know it. It's going to be, it's different this time, right? We watched the 2000 .com, this parabolic move in stocks in 2000, and then we watched this crater of what happened in 2008, 2009, and Lehman going out of business. You've been part of almost every major larger story. Like when it was smaller, Wall Street in the 70s and 60s, it was big, but not as big as it is today. I wonder if you see these generational shifts where people say, you've heard it's different this time. You see it with what happened with GameStop and these sort of gamified and Robinhood. But I think you know what I'm referring to, and that is You see this parabolic move and these crazy things happening. Have you been able to reflect on the fact that you've been part of all this stuff for such a long period of time? And almost as I think of you, if you were a money manager, would you today, or what happened in the pandemic? Have you been able to reflect on the changes between that, or is it different, or is it always the same to you?
No, it's different, and I think that I'm so grateful to have been able to see all of that really, truly different cycles in our economy, and being witness to and part of so many extraordinary things that have occurred. And I think that when you look at market come downs and euphoric periods, I think you always go back to one theme, and that is if it really is. I mean, when we were talking about .com and focused on companies that made no money, had very little revenue, and yet the valuations were incredible. I mean, we had a segment. We had a little joke amongst ourselves at CNBC, and we would say annoying little comparisons. Oh, let's do an annoying little comparison of Joe Schmo's Pizza Place.com versus Ford Motor. And you looked at the valuations and the backdrop. The same thing happened years later in the housing market, where housing prices were up and then collapsed, as well as leading to the biggest sell-off and Lehman Brothers bankruptcy. I think you have to remember that basics matter and fundamentals matter. And if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. And that is something that you want to remember, and you want to protect yourself going into and living through euphoric periods.
And you think they just continue, though? Because you and I saw .com. We saw sort of the 2007 housing crisis, where I remember, you've seen the movies about people owning 5 houses without the proper income. I was always astonished that friends of mine were buying like 2 homes, and I thought I made good money. I'm like, I could never afford to have 2 or 3 homes. And of course, they ultimately couldn't afford it. And do you think that this cycle just continues with every generation? It just gets more and more dramatic? Is it just part of speculation? Because you've seen it for 30 years, and you probably have been able to see almost some of the same cycles happen during that period of time. I mean, nowadays we're pulling back a little bit here. Obviously the Fed's raising, but I'm curious as to your reflection on today, where we are today versus the last 30 years. Like, where would you put us in the cycle?
Well, I think that there will always be speculators. And I think that there will also always be a community of people who have never lived through the last bad thing, who are operating right now, who have not really witnessed it. So I would always allow for a continuation or a repeat of that kind of behavior. But I think today you also have to consider the backdrop and, the strength of the consumer. Look, I do think we are about to hit some serious curveballs coming at us in terms of the economy. I do think 2023 is going to be a very tough year. And, that's just based on my own reporting and talking with, some of the people who've made some dire predictions. But I also think that the U.S. is resilient, and it will get through it. I would not be surprised to see a repeat of some of the behavior that we've seen in other crashes, frankly, because of those reasons. You have people who've never experienced it before, and you just have speculators, and they come in different forms.
I want to eventually get to Bitcoin, because obviously my company's a big Bitcoin miner, and I want to get your take on the rise of that, because you've been around the entire time. But I've seen a lot of interviews with you. Do you have like one or two like really big favorites that you like? This was my fan. Like, I'm a fan girl right now of you. And do you have like a fan girl or fan moment of like, I'm going to interview this person and it's so incredible?
I don't. I mean, I feel like the interviews that I want to have are the interviews of the people that I need to speak to at that moment. So, you could always have, this is a great get, but at the same time, is it a great get now in this moment in time? So, I have had a lot of really great interviews in terms of CEOs, heads of state, international stories, domestic, but I can't say that one is, this like that I feel is better than the other.
Really? Not one that like you're like, wow, I can't believe I'm in the presence of this person?
Well, I mean, at the time, I felt that way about, President Clinton, President Obama, President Trump, Condi Rice, CEOs like, Prince. I interviewed Prince, and I was absolutely starstruck and in awe. I will say that.
Yeah,
I'm embarrassed to say it because he was telling me to sing. Oh, Maria, come on, sing with me. And I'm like, I can't sing with you. I'm with Prince. And it was a cute moment, but you asked me, so yes.
Yeah, I think we all have somebody that like, I didn't get to interview him, but I was a big fan. I grew up, really admiring Kirk Kerkorian, and I got to interview the guy who wrote a book about him, and I was like, he didn't write he's not Kirk Kerkorian, but I would have loved to be able to, there's certain things I would have loved to do, and you've gotten to interview so many people. I kind of don't I don't know if you realized over time how big you become in terms of all the people that have been on your show and all the things that you've seen over this period of time. Because remember, it's not that long that we've had this cable television revolution where you were ubiquitous. You were everywhere. Everyone knew you. You were in Money Never Sleeps. All these iconic things where you were yourself. You were becoming you're like, I'm Maria Bartiromo, and you are. It's just, to me, you became so huge. What did you think about becoming, and what was it like for you to be inducted into the Cable Hall of Fame?
Oh, it was incredibly, I was so honored, and it was so exciting. I think that being recognized by your colleagues in the cable industry is really special. And I'm grateful. Look, I'm grateful to so many people who I've worked with and who have helped me and supported me, because, it has been an incredible moment. It's been something that, I've dreamt of. All I can say is I try not to take myself too seriously. And I know that, everything is very fragile. And so I'm just trying to, work hard. I'm a hard worker. I've always been a hard worker. I have no problem with working hard, especially since I love what I do. And that has enabled me to have, luck and, in what you're talking about, and meeting so many people and enriching myself in terms of information. Working at Fox has been so informative and meaningful to me, because I've been able to learn things and study things that I never have. For example, when I got here, I had no idea about the corruption happening in Washington and the dirty tricks that happen. Because when I stumbled over the fact that, Hillary Clinton's, one political campaign made up a story about another political campaign, and that was all it was, the Russia collusion lie. and it could go viral across the world, and the media would drive it, and put a sitting president on defense. That was pretty extraordinary to me. And to also see, the influence peddling story that nobody wants to cover, it's amazing that these things happen in plain sight. And coming from CNBC for 20 years, covering business and the economy, I had no idea. Maybe that's why I was so moved by it, because I had no idea that these kinds of dirty tricks really happen. And they do. And the American people deserve to know and to understand, as well as to understand, how things work. So I've been so grateful to have had this career, and I really appreciate you saying all that you said. I'm what can I say? I am grateful, and I'm grateful to family and friends and supporters.
So it's interesting you talk about corruption in Washington, and I don't necessarily know as in depth as you do about it, because you report on it and you see it all the time in terms of the landscape. But I know as a financial guy that I know an agency, FINRA, and what they have done to there's the number of broker dealers in this country has went from thousands. It's been cut in half in the last 10 years. And I've spoken to my friends who are in the industry, and they're afraid to even say anything about them. And that was the first experience I've had where I openly have friends of mine who've had to deal with them, and the industry, their own members, can't stand dealing with them. They think they're completely unfair, and also, by the way, in their own minds, corrupt. It is astonishing that later on stories come out and they just get put under the rug, that the conspiracy people, they end up being true. That's the part that's pretty crazy. I totally understand what you mean by when you finally open your eyes to things that are taking place and it's happening right in plain sight and no one's saying anything about it until later. I think that's probably why the Fox is such a watched network, because people feel like maybe there's something real about it. I thought that you became iconic when you were on The Sopranos. That was the moment I thought that was the moment I thought this Italian American had made it. You were on this iconic show and they were referring to you as anyways. I thought that was not that it's relevant what I think about you, but I think that the moment I saw you on The Sopranos, I thought, okay, Maria is a god, and she's on The Sopranos. My wife was like, look who's there. It was pretty crazy. What was that like for you?
I was really excited about it. Look, I think, the shows and pop culture came side by side with what was happening, I think, in the market, and a moment in time when the individual investor and people were, the individual investor was doing well and people wanted to watch the stock market. And so, I was right there on the floor of the exchange, learning so much. And, it was a great place, the New York Stock Exchange. There were 5,000 people on the floor at one time. And, there were 5 rooms, trading rooms. And there was so much camaraderie. When I first got down there, it was tough because some people did not want me down there. It was a boys' club. But over time, I made so many friends there. And actually, it was funny because some of them knew the Rex, because the Rex Manor was in Brooklyn. And so I really had such a great time at the New York Stock Exchange and learned so much and met so many great people. And I will always remember and fond memories of that moment. There was another moment in time that was indicative of that, that little space and that little time in America, in American history, when, Wall Street was hopping and .com was being born.
So Maria, I'm gonna ask you a question in a second, and I didn't want to ask it, so I will cut it out if you don't want. I have an older daughter who's 24 or 20. Yeah, she's 24, and I have a younger daughter, and I never referenced this my whole career, knowing who you were and watching you, but you were in an old boys club. You were this beautiful reporter, I think people were somewhat overwhelmed that how pretty you were and how smart you were, and they kind of couldn't deal with it. Maybe they just had to accept it over time because it was a boys' club. There was not really anyone down there, a lot of females down there. I mean, there was the Meryl Streeps of the world and others that tried to break in and did, but like you became the first sort of icon down there. And I wondered how you dealt with this money honey thing. Did you embrace it? Was it okay with you? I know that you, since you were the first, you were pioneering things down there. Did it bother you or did you enjoy it? How did you deal with it?
Yeah, you know what? It didn't bother me at all. And I remember people would call me and say, that's ridiculous. Why are they doing that? I was so grateful to have gotten noticed. And frankly, what was it? The New York Post or, one of the papers coming up with the idea of money honey because it rhymed. And frankly, I was doing really important work, and I never felt that I wasn't being taken seriously by the people who I was interviewing. I would interview CEOs, and we got right to business. And my, all of my guests knew that when they came on with me, I had done the work, understand the issue, have the right questions, and we would be having a smart conversation. So there was never a question in my mind that, that hurt me or, tainted what I was doing in any way. So I was never uncomfortable with it. In fact, I was always tough. I mean, I had to be tough on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. I had many incidents where somebody tried to bully me in one way or another, and I had to push back. One guy, oh my God, he didn't like me doing a story on AIG. I was at the AIG coast and I was telling everybody what was going on. And he had this metal, they had mobile machines where they were putting orders in. And it was metal, really heavy. And he jammed it in my back while I was on air. I was like, whoa. And then I had to go to medical and he was suspended. I mean, another guy, screamed at me. I mean, I was like, no, don't speak to me like that, and I was on my way. So I always had a bit of a toughness. Mm-hmm. And sometimes even if I was scared, I made believe I was tough. And, that was enough.
But you're also very smart. And I think that over time, regardless, I wasn't, of course, there. I just watched you down there. Over time, you gained the respect of everyone because they knew you were really, really smart. I mean, that's my point is that you've been known to be that smart reporter, and that's obviously why you ended up at Fox. And
that's the thing. I always said I'm going to own this job. They're not going to tell me and, brush me aside. I'm going to make sure I know more about this issue than they do, so they can't have anything on me. It was definitely something I thought about.
When I have an older daughter, she's at Amazon now, and I told her when she was younger, because she was thinking about doing broadcasting, and I would show her your show and tell her that you had went from a couple different places and really became iconic in this area. Really pretty girl. But my daughter's beautiful, but she's super, super, super smart. And I said, over time, that'll be an asset for you. And then I was showing her that basically you're one of those people that made that work for you. Because some people aren't, they have, maybe they're really pretty, but, and then guys too, they get an in with someone they know or whatever, but then they got to be able to be smart to be everlasting, to be there to last through the times. And that you're one of those people who've outlasted so many other people in the space and have gotten bigger over time.
Well, I would just say to your daughter, beauty can get you in the door, but it cannot keep you there. Yeah. So it's very important to know your stuff and own the job.
Right. And I think that she's taken that to heart. I've given her that same advice. I want to end, because I know we only have a few minutes. I want to end on a subject and I want to cue it up for you this way, and that is, and this cuts part political and it cuts part just like human condition, and that is, we hear talking points from politicians about Bitcoin, and they say Bitcoin is used for so many nefarious purposes, and then, which is factually, this is somehow to say that U.S. dollars, currency, the ATM machines have not been used for nefarious purposes. They talk about the energy use of Bitcoin, but they don't talk about how much it costs to print dollars, how much it costs to take them in the Brinks trucks to the banks. They don't talk about the number of ATMs that have to run energy-wise to do this. They have political talking points. And I wondered if you could, because you have a very specific niche here, and that is you were there from the beginning, and you've been there now. What's your take on your watching Bitcoin develop into what it's developed?
Well, I can't say that I know enough about Bitcoin specifically, but I think what I see being shaped is a world where there are digital assets and increasing use of digital assets. I think what's going to be critical is regulation. I don't know who will be regulating the market, who is overseeing it. Is it several agencies? And I also want to make sure that there is enough ways to use the Bitcoin. So I don't know. I wouldn't want to misspeak in terms of, really which currency is best and which will be in use mostly. But I think we are clearly in a new place in terms of digital assets and the blockchain technology.
I only have two more questions for you. Elon Musk. The guy clearly is like Thomas Edison of our times. We know he's an incredible guy. Does he end up buying Twitter? Does it end up closing, in your opinion? Do you know what's going to happen there and your thoughts around that?
I don't. I don't. But I think there's a real interest at this point and a pursuit of leveling the playing field with regard to free speech. So if that's one way to do it, if Parler is, another way, Rumble, there has to be some balance. You cannot have government regulate an industry into doing the right thing. You've got social media. They censor a lot of stuff. People know it. And just the fact that we're seeing the market correct this issue by creating new entrants and encouraging big spenders and, to go in and do something is a really good move. And I think that that's the way you want it to happen. You want it to happen by market forces, not by government regulation. But that's coming too, it appears, if you're talking about perhaps Section 230 and its impact on social media.
I wanted to end it on, obviously you work at the most popular, I think maybe the most popular channel and show in the world. I don't know if I got those statistics wrong, but I read them all and it sure seems like I'm getting it right. I just, if you would have told me that it's almost like CNN was Sears and you guys are, just to become so big and so big over everybody else just kind of blows my mind, which leads me to the election coming up. What do you think about the drama around this election? I mean, is it possible for us to get through this in a way that doesn't come out where one side is mad at the other, or is that we're too tribal now and that's going to be impossible?
Well, I really hope that we can come together because it's so ridiculous that we have allowed a small cabal of people to spread hate, and it's just not who any of us are. And I think that the elections will be important because it feels like you're going to hear from the people. And, unfortunately, I don't think it's any surprise that things are not going well. The economy is a mess. Foreign policy is a mess. America's adversaries are on the march. This is, I'm so grateful that I was born and lived and am living in the time that I am, where we had so many incredible opportunities. I'm a kid from Brooklyn and I, worked hard, watched my family work hard, my neighbors work hard, and, didn't have expectations of where I am today. But I also know that was because of the environment around me, and the neighborhood shaped me and America shaped me. And today we've got such incredible threats with the Communist Party of China wanting to overtake the United States as the number one superpower, and the intelligence showing that we've got, incredible intellectual property theft and surveillance programs. And, we really need to unify and be on the same page, because the threats from the outside world are serious. And unfortunately, if things go the wrong way, your kids and their kids and my kids and their kids, well, I don't have kids, but next generations, upcoming generations, are not going to have the opportunities that you and I had, and they're not going to have the freedom and liberty that we have come to expect and love so much. So I definitely have over time recognized these things as well. And I love working at Fox. I love my shows. I love my colleagues. I love being able to have this connection with the audience. And I really feel that I do have that connection with the audience. We're talking, we're all wanting answers. And I think we're getting that. We'll see if the midterms are a catalyst for that. I hope so. You're
young. You've been at this a long time. You've seen tons of cycles. How much longer do you want to do it? You could do it a lot longer. I was really thinking about this because you're in great shape. You're on the job. You're on top of everything. How much longer do you want to do it?
Well, listen, I'm glad you said that I'm young, because I was getting a little, because you were saying, you were this and you were that earlier. And I'm like, Todd. So thank you for that. I am biking several days a week, 20 miles. I'm doing yoga regularly. I'm trying to, live my best life. I love what I'm doing. So I, at this point, have no intention of stopping that, because I'm having a ball. I mean, it's incredibly, gratifying to be able to cover the stories that I'm covering. And I'm learning something every day and trying to, communicate it.
If I inferred you were, then I apologize. That is fundamentally not true. I
forgive you. I didn't say anything when you said it. I was like, okay.
Oh, I have to go back. I have to go back and look at the tape, because I will tell you that I was saying, like, you're kind of what I was really trying to say is that there were times where I grew up when I was younger, when I was like 10, 11, 12, when I first saw Warren Buffett on Lou Dobbs when I was 11, when CNN was first out, when there was first Moneyline, that there were all these people before you, and for you to get bigger than all of them, and for me to ask people, do you remember Louis Rukeyser? And they don't. I just thought to myself, does she know how big, of all the things she's done, how big she's become in terms of the mind of the common investor today? The average person knows you they can see your face and they know who you are. Anyone on Wall Street, anyone paying attention to the financial markets, and not just financial markets, but Fox, how big you become. That's what I'm trying to say. I think you could probably do this as long as you wanted to. And I do think, by the way, because we're pretty close in age, that that's a young age nowadays, and
yes.
and all your history makes you better. I mean, I just don't think that. I recall that growing up, seeing reporters that have been around a long time, that they were the people that made you comfortable when you needed news, right? And you become that person that. When there's something going on bad, I flip on your channel. I want to know what you're saying, because we trust you.
Yeah.
I trust you. I think most financial investors trust you. People who have grown up watching you trust you. And I was trying to say, did you know you became that person that when there's a crisis, people want to see what you're saying, who you're interviewing, and I'm grateful you're here, Maria.
And Todd, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. I am so grateful for all that you said, and I am for sure so grateful to viewers who trust me, and I will do everything to cherish that trust and continue to build on it. That's what I'm doing, and that's what I don't want to stop doing.
You could ask Charles Payne. I had dinner with him a couple months ago, and the first thing I said was, when we were at dinner, I was like, dude, you work with Maria. He's like, well, what can I say? Anyways, Maria, take care. Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate the vast topics we talked about. And thanks for doing the show. I really, really appreciate it.
Todd, I really appreciate you having me. Thank you. I hope we can do it again.
I'm going to explain to you real quick. We're rolling out. There's a reason for it.
Yeah, you got it right.